Number 1. New woods. When I was a kid, my parents, grandparents, and aunts and uncles were a lot different than parents seem to be today. We would just be sent outside to play at even really young ages without any supervision. This happened all the time when we would be visiting my grandma's house. She lived out in the country too, so we were used to going out into the woods and playing hide-and-go-seek or something like that. When I was like 9 years old, my grandma actually began seeing a guy who lived even further out in the country than she did. He didn't even have a bathroom in his house. There was an outhouse outside. I remember him claiming, up until the day he died, that he had never used the inside toilet in his entire life. The house he lived in, up in the middle of nowhere, was this really small shack. We were only there to visit, and at night, we would go back to my grandma's actual house in order to sleep while she and he stayed there. But the reason I bring this up is because it was really rural. It was literally one of the cabins in the woods that you would see from some horror movies. So this happened my very first time visiting out there. While I was used to the woods that surrounded my grandma's house, I wasn't at all familiar with this area. As normal, my family always felt that the kids should go outside and play, so they sent us out. 3 of my cousins and I went out to explore the area. We had gotten pretty far away from the house when we decided to go and play hide-and-go-seek. And when I was off to hide, I found myself a very good hiding spot behind or under a rock that was just jutting out from the side of a hill. It was ingenious, and I knew that no one would be able to find me. Well, I was right. I was under that rock for a very long time, waiting for someone to show up, but no one did. And after waiting and waiting, I finally decided to come out from under the rock and see what was going on. I couldn't find any of my cousins, and I kept walking around calling for them. However, I didn't get an answer from any of them. I didn't really begin panicking yet, even though I was a little scared. I figured, even if I couldn't find them, I would just head back to my grandma's boyfriend's shack. And yeah, saying grandma's boyfriend sounds weird as heck. So I began heading back to the shack, or at least I thought that I was heading back to the shack. I don't know how long it had taken us to get to the area that we were playing hide-and-go-seek in, but after a while I realized that it was taking me a lot longer to get back. It had been late afternoon when we had gone out, and it was in the fall, so it was beginning to get dark outside too, and that got me finally starting to panic a little bit. I kept trying to find my way back, but I just kept getting myself more and more lost. And the fact that the sun was going down was scaring me even more. It wasn't very long until it was completely dark outside, and I was super duper lost. If you have never been out in the woods in the dark, it's hard to imagine how scary it really is. And at 9 years old, it was so terrifying. Every little noise was terrifying. Trying to figure out what it was, and a child's imagination is so much more vivid than an adult's, and it could come up with the worst ideas that it can. If I knew then what I know now, I would have stopped wandering around. I was just getting myself more and more lost. I kept hoping to hear my parents' voices calling out for me or something, and I kept telling myself that if I kept walking, I would eventually get back to the shack. Wandering in the dark, I was hungry and thirsty. I was only finally able to get some water to drink when I had come across a creek. I was used to drinking from creeks, so I drank quite a bit, but I also had not come across a creek before, so I knew I was much more lost than I thought I was. Not knowing what else to do, I began following the creek. I figured it led somewhere, which in retrospect doesn't really make too much sense, but I didn't know what else to do. After a while, I thought that I saw something up ahead of me. Although it was dark out, the moon was pretty full, so I did have some light, and that made it easier to see up ahead, and there was something sitting by the creek ahead of me. When I got closer, I noticed it was a person, but a really raggy person, wearing a coat or something with a hood. I considered walking up to him and asking him if he could help me find my way back to my grandma's boyfriend's house. But he was also a stranger, and I was not supposed to talk to him. While I was wondering what to do, he stood up. He must have noticed me because he began walking in my direction. More so, it seemed like he was limping as he was coming in my direction. I didn't know what to do, but I just stood there in fear. He came closer and closer to me, and I got a good look at him. He had his hood on, but he had a lot of really long and ratty and matted hair. His skin was very white, and I could see cracks in it when he got really close to me. About 10 feet away from me, I heard him croak, "Little boys shouldn't be out in the woods so late at night. You never know what might get ya." It was terrifying. My body took over and I took off, running back in the woods away from the creek. The man was pretty decrepit, so it was easy enough to outrun him, but I didn't even look behind to see if he was trying to catch me. I just ran and ran and ran. I lost the guy, but I was still lost, and now I was scared even more with every noise that I heard. But at the very least, I was headed in the opposite direction of the creek, which had to be leading me back to the shack. I'll cut to the chase. After an hour or so of retreating away from the creek, I noticed some lights up ahead. I also heard someone calling my name. It was my dad, and he was with my grandma's boyfriend. I ran up to them, basically crying my eyes out. I was happy to be found. To this day, I had never had a scarier experience. I told everyone about what I had seen. My grandma's boyfriend told me he thought he knew the guy that I described to him. He was an old guy who lived even further into the woods than even he did. Apparently there were stories about him doing some pretty horrible and illegal things. He had been suspected of abducting a kid about 30 years prior. He was never charged with anything because the kid was never found. That's the time when he moved out into the middle of nowhere. Very few people ever see him or had any contact with him. I do find it weird that they would have told me about these things at 9 years old, but this was a different time and they were different people. But yeah, that old man was my boogeyman. Number 2. Sleeping. I truly do not know how to explain what happened here. I have problems sleeping very often, and I tend to wake up when the sun comes up. Although I have blinds on my windows, I think everyone knows they mostly do very little to keep the room from getting bright. So in order to be able to sleep if I need to, I sleep in a canopy bed. For those of you who might not know what that is, I pull the curtains, which on my bed are pretty heavy, so when the sun comes up, it remains relatively dark on the bed. I always sleep with the curtains drawn, without exception. This just happened to be a few days ago. I was alone in bed, mostly because I live alone anyway. This was one of those nights where I was having a problem falling asleep, so I was lying there trying to get my mind to think of something light or funny, because that is generally what I do to go to sleep. I don't know how long I was lying in bed. I sleep on my side too, which is important to know, because behind me, I heard a whispering and almost hissing voice say, "Get up, get up, get up." A shock went through my body, and I sat straight up in bed. I turned to face the direction that the voice had come from, but of course, with the curtains on the bed closed, I wasn't able to see anything at all. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I had clearly heard that there was someone in my room, and whoever it was sounded crazy. I had no way to tell where the person who had whispered at me could have been in my room. I don't know how long I sat there, in the bed, waiting to see if I would hear another noise or something. If someone was moving around in my bedroom, it should have been quiet enough for me to hear it. but I couldn't hear anything. I was too scared to open the curtain and look around because, again, I didn't know what I would find. My bed was up against the wall, and I scrunched up against the wall as I listened to see if whoever was in my room would say anything else. But no matter how much time passed, I didn't hear anything. I finally decided I needed to go and look around my house to see if anyone was in it. I had an old baseball bat in my room, so I picked it up and I searched through the house. I didn't find anyone in the house, but I did notice that my basement door to the outside was unlocked, and I promptly locked it and checked all the windows in the house to make sure they were locked as well. I have no real idea if anyone was in my house. I have no idea who or what was whispering at me, but I do know that the experience only made it even more difficult for me to go to sleep. It's been several days, and I have not heard anything like this since. Number 3. Garage. When I was 16, I was allowed to drive around the extra car, and of course I spent it driving around my friends as much as possible. I was also allowed to stay out later than normal, and was given a bunch of other freedoms. I was driving home on a Friday night once. It was pretty late, and when I got to the house it was pretty dark. I was an only child. My parents hadn't told me where they were going that night, but they were obviously not home when I got there. I hit the button to open up the garage and pulled into it. As I did, though, I noticed some movement in the corner of the garage. After my eyes adjusted, I noticed that there was someone in the garage, hiding in the corner. Someone had broken into our house and was in the garage. That was the only explanation. The door was halfway down at that point. I hit the button to have it open back up. I was terrified, and I waited for it to be high enough for me to pull out of the garage. And when it was, I pulled out as fast as I could and rushed down the street. I knew where the police station was, and I drove directly there. They drove out to the house, while I waited at the station. The guy was not at the house still, but they did pick him up. He had some items that he took from our house. I also found out he'd been in jail before for assault. I keep thinking what might have happened if I hadn't noticed him in the garage. What would have happened if I had gotten out of the car in the garage with an intruder lurking in there in the dark with me? I have no idea what might have happened. I was just lucky that I had noticed him. Number 4. How a birthday party can go wrong. This happened about 3 years ago. I'm 17 now, but still I was traumatized after this happened on my birthday. My name is Gianna. I'm a dark-skinned female, and I live in a small town in New Jersey, and I have about 9 friends. And we were a group of 10. My friends were Alan, Ryan, Ernesto, Ben, Tim, Tim's sister Jessica, Ben's boyfriend Kai, and my cousins Willie and Ruth. Me and Ernesto were the closest of friends, and we had known each other since middle school. I was about to turn 15, and I was getting ready for my birthday party, and I was excited because I decided to have a cabin party. So my mother designed to rent out a small cabin for my birthday. A cozy cabin in the middle woods, where we would have access to a kitchen, a living room, with a TV, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. That day was going to be cozy and peaceful. My mom helped me with the decorations. Before my friends could arrive, we hung balloons, streamers, and string lights, so that it will give a bit of cottagecore vibes. By the time we had finished putting up the decorations, I heard knocks at the door. I went to get it, and my cousins and friends arrived. As soon as I saw Ernesto, I gave him a tight hug and welcomed them all inside and said, "You're all just on time." As soon as all of us got settled, my mom ordered us pizza. Then after pizza, we all huddled together and started telling stories. Sometime later, my mom told me she had to go into town. My mom was a little bit worried about leaving us all here alone by ourselves, but I assured her that we were all older and that we can take care of ourselves. And I promised my mom to check all the doors and recheck the windows and see if they're locked. Once my mom left, we all went outside. We started a fire and cooked some s'mores. We were all having a great time telling scary stories by the campfire. One of my friends, Jessica, started to tell a story, a true crime story, about a female serial murderer. We were laughing and giggling, hiding the fact that we were a bit scared. But Ben told us that his mom and dad got a divorce after he came out as gay. His mom supported him, but his dad was a batshit homophobic crazy person. After his mom and dad split, he would constantly harass him, and his mom got to the point where she had to file a restraining order against him, with Ben nearly crying while Kai was holding his hand. We asked him what his father looked like. He had a photo and showed it to us. After showing us the photo, we suddenly heard a loud crunching noise coming from the woods. Keep in mind that we were in the middle of nowhere, and the next neighbor was only like a mile away. And that's when Ernesto said, "What the hell was that?" I said in a calm voice, "Maybe an animal?" Alan, the bravest of the group, said, "Oh, hell no. I've never heard an animal make that sound before." I started to agree with Alan because what kind of animal makes a crunching sound? We got back to making some more s'mores. That's when my cousin Ruth was telling another story, that she had a crush on this girl in school. We were so deeply interested in her story that we forgot about the sound. That was until we heard it again, but it sounded much more closer. We all got creeped out to the point where we had to go back inside. We all power walked towards the cabin. As soon as we all got inside, I locked the doors behind us and made sure the deadbolt was locked in tight. As soon as we all got inside, we all decided we should watch a show before hitting the hay. We all decided to watch some anime on Netflix. After one season, we all decided to go to bed. 6 of us got the beds upstairs and downstairs, while the rest of us 4 slept in the living room. Me, Ernesto, Jessica, and Ryan, we slept downstairs in the living room. My cousins slept in the bedroom downstairs near the living room. Kai and Ben slept in one of the rooms upstairs, while Alan and Tim slept in the other. We all wished each other a good night, and we all went to sleep. My 3 other friends already went to sleep, while I was still on the phone, strolling through Instagram, until I felt myself starting to feel heavy. Once I felt more tired, I plugged my phone into the charger, and then I drifted off to sleep. I may have been asleep for a few minutes when I heard a loud banging noise at the door. All 4 of us were awake, and one of us had to see who was at the door. I decided to check it out. All of our hearts nearly skipped a beat. This cabin was a bit old, and it did not have a peephole, so I couldn't see who or what was at the door. The rest of us decided not to wake up the rest of our friends, as we did not want to creep them out, and we were all positively sure it was probably just an animal or a stray dog. But the direction of the sound changed and moved towards the window, specifically the living room window. Someone was tapping very hard on the window pane. I got down on my hands and knees and carefully went to look out the window. I pulled back the drapes just a little bit so I could see what was outside. What I saw made my body freeze in fear. I was face to face with a very tall man, probably in his 50s. He had no shirt on. The guy was only in his boxers, and he had no socks or shoes on either, and he was holding a hunting rifle in one of his hands. The moment he saw me, he smiled at me with a wide smile. He was also waving at me as if he was taunting me. He pointed to the front door as if he was telling me to let him in, but instantly I recognized that he was Ben's father from the photo that Ben showed us. I dropped the curtain back and I went to my cousins and friends downstairs. I told them what I saw and who was outside, and they were all scared just as I was. We all ran up and went to get the rest of our friends upstairs. Me, Ernesto, and Ryan went to wake up Alan and Tim in the room next to Kai and Ben. We all told them that there was a crazy person outside the window. They were all so tired, but when I said crazy person, they all jolted awake. Fully on guard when Kai and Ben asked me who was outside, I was hesitant to tell them, but I said, "It's your dad, Ben." I saw Ben's face change into a horrified expression, and I seen that there were tears filling up in his eyes, and he was starting to have a meltdown. Jessica and Tim tried to comfort him, including Kai. Some of them were a bit skeptical and asked me if I wasn't dreaming. I assured them that I was fully awake the moment. I said that we heard a loud bang on the door, along with a voice from Ben's dad saying, "Let me in, little kids." We all were horrified, standing still and not knowing what to do. One of us or some of us had to go downstairs and get one of our phones. We had to call the police. We all decided to go down as a group. Ben's psycho of a father already knew that we were already in the cabin, but we didn't want to let him know our location within the cabin. Tim went to grab his phone. You're probably wondering why we didn't look for weapons like every horror movie. If you're wondering, yes, that's exactly what we did. The rest of us ransacked the cabin, looking for something to defend ourselves with. Jessica and Ruth took out 2 chopping knives from the kitchen. Ben got some pepper spray he found in his bag. I found a metal bat, and Ernesto grabbed a pocket knife from his backpack. Tim, who was tasked to call the police, said that the service was tacky and that he was having trouble getting through. I told him to hold on, and I would check my phone. Before I could even get into the living room, we heard a loud banging from the front door. Ben's dad was trying to kick down the door. After many more kicks, he kicked a big hole in the door and said, "I'm gonna kill all of you." The rest of my friends were all screaming like crazy. Before he could unlock the door, Ben ran and approached him and sprayed him in the eyes and nose. His dad jumped back and screamed in pain, screaming racial slurs and bad words. Ben swung open the door and yelled at me, saying, "Gianna, hit him." I picked up the metal bat and swung hard on his dad's head. His psycho dad fell down on the ground, not moving at all. We all ran back upstairs, and we ran inside the upstairs. We all worked together to barricade the door. Then I remembered that Tim still had his phone. I asked to let me see if I could call 911. Luckily, the call managed to get through. I told our situation to the operator, our location, and how many of us there were. The operator told us to stay in the barricaded room until the police officers arrived. Also, they will send a few officers to the scene. And we hung up the call, but we realized that the door was now open, so we could see that the psycho could now come in. Nothing was stopping him. We sat in that room for what felt like an eternity, until we heard sirens in the distance and could see flashing lights from outside of the cabin. There were about 5 police cars outside. Luckily, the sicko was still unconscious when the police arrived, and they took him away in handcuffs. When he woke up, he found himself in a police car. The police then greeted us, and they asked us to give a statement. We told him everything that happened, and they were making sure that we were not injured. We were all untouched, but very traumatized about what just had happened. It left us very shaken up, and we all wanted to go home. The cops stayed with us at the cabin until our parents came and picked us all up. Like I said in the beginning of the story, we live in a small town, and it didn't take long for us to hear the news. We found out that Ben's father had somehow found out that I invited Ben to my birthday party at the cabin. He planned to kill him, and all of us. According to the police report, he was also hyped up on illegal substances when he tried to break into the cabin. Today, Ben has now been seeing his therapist, but I thank him and myself. That day, if it wasn't for his smart thinking, we wouldn't be alive today. and I'm really glad we made it out of those woods alive. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. I'm gonna do something a little bit different today. I've been watching a channel on YouTube called Jack's Horror Shack. I'm going to include a link at the end of the video in case you might want to visit and watch a couple of his videos. They're actually pretty good. They're very, very creepy, and he has a really interesting style. So if you have a moment, click on the link. I'll put it in the description too, and check it out. You might enjoy it. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified of new videos. If you have an original story you want narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. In the meantime, don't forget to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.